Ladies and gentlemen, today is July 31st, Thursday, 2014, and this is the KNKL show number 189, where we learn to be better artists normally, but today just so happens to be Thursday, and that means we like to explore inner peace. Inner peace. And today we're going to be talking about a very important subject called waiting for an invitation. Waiting on the world to change, as I like to call it. So, let's get into it, shall we? So, the first thing that I want to talk about is why waiting for an invitation can actually be a very toxic and poisonous thing to your life, and why it will actually destroy you and destroy your life. So, let me start things first off with me as prime example number one. So, I've been waiting for a long time. I've been waiting for something to change, waiting for the magical day that I would wake up and I would say, hey, I can now make perfect tutorials. I can now make perfect Thoughtful Thursdays without muting myself, because I recorded this twice, right? First time I completely messed up halfway through. Second time I finished it and I was like, yeah. And then I looked at the little microphone button. I was like, why does it have a line through it? Why is there a line going through the mic? And then I realized I spent a half an hour talking to nobody, and then nobody would be able to hear me. And that is really fun. So anyway, I was waiting for the day that I would no longer make mistakes like that. And I think it was good that I took a small break off of making the tutorials and all that stuff, just to kind of realign, kind of reorganize my life and figure out what I wanted to do. But as soon as I figured out that plan, I still was waiting on something. And I was waiting for an invitation. I was waiting for something to tell me that this is what I was supposed to do. Or I was waiting for my skills to improve without me actually sitting down and practicing on a day-to-day basis. And this is something that I have struggled with my entire life. There's a lot of things that I've always just like waited around for, waited too long. The opportunity comes and goes because I procrastinated or I distracted myself, so that way I would think that I was busy, but I really wasn't. Okay? So, waiting for an invitation also comes into play with jobs, right? You guys are all artists out there, and you want to work professionally doing your artwork. Most of you do. Some of you just are going to keep it as a hobby and all that stuff, and that's great. But for those of you that are wanting to go to that pro level, some of you may fall into this trap of, it can go either way. Like if you're self-taught, you spend your whole life working up, you build all these skills, and then you get to the end where you're like, hey, a video game company would really, really benefit from having me on their team. And you're like, all right, guys, come and get me. And then you sit in your room and you just wait for stuff to happen to you. And then nothing really ever does. Same thing if you go to college. It's like, hey, I spent all this money. My parents spent all this money so that we could go to this really prestigious art school, learn all these techniques, and now I have this degree. I have this slip of paper called a degree, and that makes me really important. Where's my invitation, world? Where's my job? And you develop this sense of entitlement that you think the world is going to give you something. And I have a shocking revelation that I found out. Probably, pretty early in life, and I'm glad I did. And that was that the world actually doesn't owe you anything. And it never is going to give you anything. The only way that your life is going to become what you want it to be is by you taking the time to change yourself, to build the skills, and you have to be the one to make it happen. This is a constant story that I hear from artists. Whenever I ask them, hey, how did you get a job doing the promo art for Adventure Time? This was a guy I met at a convention last year. And he said to me, I was basically doing this fan art, doing this and that for them. And then they noticed me, and then they said, hey, we could really benefit from your skills. And then he got the job doing what he loved. And I've met so many people that were working at Riot while I was working there. All these other artists would just be filtering in. I'm like, hey, where did you find these people? Man, you must have been cruising that email log, right? The 30,000 emails that come in, that pour in for apply. They pour in, okay? I'm sorry. I'm just stumbling. I'm stumbling. The 30,000 emails that would stumble in. And then magically, the person who just has to go through all those, they pick your email out of all those and be like, hey, this guy's a lucky person. They throw him onto the team. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. I got another shocking revelation for you guys. Is that when you guys apply for a job at a studio, that email just gets sent into a giant folder of thousands and thousands of other applicants, and they never get looked at. They never do. Like, they might finally sit down one day and be like, hey, we really need some new artists. Let's look through these emails. And the chances of them finding you are so abysmal that it just stacks the odds against you. And it's a literal gamble, and you will lose almost every time. It's not a good way to do it. The best way to get noticed by a company and to get a job is to be doing the job before you get paid. Doing the job before you get paid, which is what my friend at the convention that I met last year was doing. He was doing the job before he got paid. That was what I was doing before I got, my job at Riot. I was doing fan art. I was posting it on the forums. I was creating shows and doing time lapses of the characters. And then when I got noticed by them, by the time I sent in my application, they already knew who I was. They were waiting to see my name. You see how that makes you so much more available. It makes the opportunity so much more prominent to show itself, as opposed to, oh, hey, there's a listing on the League of Legends site. Oh, there's a listing on the World of Warcraft site for an artist. Oh, here comes my application along with thousands of other people that want that same job. And now the odds are terribly stacked against you. So I've talked about a couple things that can actually get you ahead of the game. One of them being doing the job before you get paid for it, posting on the forums, going to conventions, meeting the actual art directors and the other artists that work at those studios is another great way. I met Samwise Didier, the art director for Blizzard Entertainment, at WonderCon last year in California. And prior to that, I met Justin Thavarat, who is another art guy. I actually don't know if he's still working with Blizzard, but I met him years ago at Video Games Live. Just all these interesting events. You will meet people from the industry, especially if you're in California, right? That's the best place to just meet people. And just get them familiar with your face. Get them to know your name. And then if you can, try to set up some sort of contact with them. Say, hey, could I please send you some of my work? Hey, could I please give you a business card? Hey, and at conventions, this works really well. I have not only cards, but I'm usually an exhibitor at these things. I'll be like, oh, I would love to give you some of my prints. And you sign them, you give them to them. I don't care if they take them home and chuck them in the freaking trash. They saw my art. They still looked at it, and they will remember it if they see it again. A lot better than just opening some random email and be like, oh, hey, you heard of this guy? No. All it takes is for them to be like, hey, do you know this guy? And they're like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I got a print of that. I took it home and I threw that thing away. But man, I remember that. This guy's pretty good. We should get him in. And he's improved so much over the years, So get noticed. Do things that are going to make you unique. Stick above the pack. Don't just submit the email, because you're never going to get a response. Sad to say, but it's good that I tell you guys right now. That way you don't waste time. Don't waste your time. Don't just do the email. All right. So that sums up my whole job thing. Now let's move on to something else for waiting on the world to change. Okay? And that is waiting for people to change. Waiting for your family to change. Waiting for your negative relatives to finally become positive. And this was a problem that I had. I can attest to being one of the prime examples for this, right? I used to have the terrible problem of expecting people to change either the way that they talked, the way that they carried themselves, the way that they behaved when I was around, so that way it would make me feel more comfortable. So that way it would make me feel better. And believe it or not, this is actually what my mentality used to be. I used to say, why does that person act like that? Why do they do that thing they do? They shouldn't do that, because that makes me feel uncomfortable. They shouldn't get angry. They shouldn't boss me around. They shouldn't feel like they have to pull some power trip and feel like they're over me, right? They shouldn't do that. And then I realized the terrible error that was in that way of thinking, because those people are never going to change. They're never going to change. And if they do, it's going to be on their own accord. It's not going to be because of anything that you do. It's not going to be because you scold them and say, oh, you shouldn't do that. You ever notice how when people tell you to do something, even if you wanted to do it before they told you to do it, you automatically don't want to do it. And that is basically the principle of why this does not work. So, but even though it seems negative, saying, oh, people are never going to change, oh, the world is a terrible place and that's never going to change, the world is a terrible place, but the world is also a very beautiful place. The world is just a series of contrasting things that makes up our life, And that is what allows us to experience sadness and joy. Winning and losing. There's so many things that you must experience the contrast to get the full effect and the full picture. So anyway, so it is negative, but it's also positive, because once you realize that people are never going to change, once you realize that that person is going to keep getting angry, once you realize that person is going to keep bossing you around, and you decide within yourself that that is the way that they are, and I'm going to love them anyway, or I'm going to, I'm going to accept them for the way they are. And if they really do impact my life to the point where it's not good for me, they're turning me into something that I don't want to become, then you have to eliminate that person out of your life. You have to walk away. So, but that usually is the last resort, and it usually doesn't come to that. Because you want to know the other interesting and ironic thing that happens is once you accept people for the way that they are and you no longer expect them to change, then they almost begin to make the change that you wanted for them automatically. It's really interesting. It's like once you stop forcing it to happen, once you stop trying to force it to happen, it almost will naturally start to happen on its own. It's really, really cool. I like it a lot. So, yeah, just realize that people are not going to change and that you need to accept them for the way that they are and love them anyway. And it released a huge burden off of my shoulders. And I always like to ask myself, if I was that person, I find myself saying this a lot, is that the person acts a certain way. If I was that person, I probably would have done the same thing. Because the problem that I have is that I say, oh, if I'm me with my experiences and my feelings and my thoughts put into their shoes, oh, I wouldn't act like that. That is childish. That is completely absurd and offensive. Right? But what you're not realizing is that that person does not have your feelings, your thoughts, and your experiences. So for you to judge them upon those things is already flawed within itself. So now I say, if I was that person with their experiences and their thoughts, I would have done the same thing. And that, again, it allows me to be a lot more understanding and a lot more loving. And it just takes away that whole thought pattern of, I wonder what they'd be like if they were different. I wonder what it would be like if they changed so that it would make me feel better. Okay? So there's another thing. Waiting for an invitation. Waiting for somebody else to change for you. Waiting for somebody to come and get you and improve your life. And this is going to be the last subject that we're going to go into. Waiting on an invitation to become the person that you want to become. To create the life that you want to create. To do the things that you want to do. And if this is ever going to happen for you, if you're ever going to be living the life that you want to live, it's going to come as a result of you making it happen, of you making the change. Nobody's going to come along and freaking take you by the hand and say, oh, hey, here, follow me to this lovely green pasture with beautiful daisies and tulips and the smell of summer air just blowing and everything's just peaceful and nice. Set up a little picnic basket, drink some wine, right? Chugging some wine, having a sandwich. That's never going to happen, right? The only way that is going to happen is if you literally take this field of dirt and say, hey, you know what? This could be an awesome scene, right? This could be an awesome landscape. And you now start planting the grass. You get the big old, carpet grass. You roll that out, right? You roll that out for miles and miles and miles. You plant the tree. You crush the grapes, right? You crush the grapes in the bucket. You fall out, and you're like, oh, stop. And then you get up. You make the sandwich. You hand sew the blanket. You lay it down. And now you have created the life that you wanted to create, right? But do you see how it's not just going to be handed to you? You have to put in a lot of work. You have to put in a lot of work and time. But if you're really passionate about it, the other really cool thing that I've noticed is that it never really feels like work. If you're working on a proper plan and you're working and resting like I do, and you are constantly focused on exactly what you're trying to do, you don't allow yourself to kind of veer off or get stressed out about stuff. You always kind of bring yourself right back to exactly what you're trying to do. Oftentimes, it's very effortless. It's very effortless, and you will get past the people that are working constantly under stress, right? Because the people that are working constantly under stress are not focused. They're going somewhere, right? The destination is here, and they're going, but they're kind of going at this weird angle, right? And they're gonna have to like loop around and then come back. Whereas you're moving slower, right? But you're moving in an exact straight line, and it's effortless. You're gonna get right there. So, hope that's a good analogy. Think of it as like the tortoise and the hare, maybe. No, actually, that's not a good analogy. First one is better. Go with that. So make the pasture. Make the meadow. Make the beautiful flowers and the trees, and then set down the picnic basket. And make the food, right? And then you will create the life that you want to. And then along the way, once you become self-sufficient, the other cool thing is that once you say, all right, I'm not going to rely on anybody else. This goes back to that interesting point of when you stop trying to force things to happen, it's almost like they start happening, right? You're laying down the grass, and then all of a sudden this guy walks in and be like, oh, hey, that's pretty cool. You're building this meadow so you can have a picnic? Wow, that's really cool. Hey, can I help? I'd really like to have a meadow so I can have a picnic too. Here, let me help you. And then this guy starts helping. You didn't even need to ask him or anything. He just starts doing it. And this other person comes in and they're like, hey, I'm really good at crushing grapes and not falling out of the bucket. Let me do that. And then they make the wine. And then it's like this team will form around you without you having to do anything, without you having to force anything to happen, because you are reliant on yourself. Those people could still take off, right? And you would still make it happen. And I think it's that mentality that is very, very attractive to people whenever you're trying to create a vision. I've had the experience with creating the comic. People have showed up and helped me become part of my team without me having to look for them. And I think the same thing goes for life. Once you become self-sufficient and you don't rely on anybody else and you don't look to the outside world to give you anything, then it's almost like it starts giving you stuff anyway. It's like, oh yeah, you don't want that? You don't want that? You think that you can survive without me? Yeah. Well, here you go, right? But the people that are like on their knees, like begging, like, oh, please, I need this, or else I'm gonna starve and die, right? And then those people, they never get anything. It's a weird dichotomy that happens with life. And I'm starting to notice that there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that happens in life. And I challenge you guys to maybe see some areas where you are trying to wait for something, wait for an invitation, wait for somebody to change, wait for the company to get back to you, wait for the life that you wanted to create just magically appears one day. I want you to take a look at areas where you might be doing that and realize that if any of that is going to happen, if anything is going to get better for you, then it is going to start with the change that you make within yourself, right? You must become the person that you want to see. Become the change that you want to see in the world. I think Gandhi said that. Yeah, it's a good one. He said it good. Stealing that. So yeah, that's going to wrap us up with our little Thoughtful Thursday. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thumbs up if you like it. Thumbs down if you don't. See you guys next time. Till then, take care. Waiting on the world to change. Waiting.